From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
It's often the organization called on when other agencies are in turmoil. The Rhode Island State Police. Overseeing more than 220 sworn personnel and 50 civilians is Colonel Stephen O'Donnell. In a show of confidence, incoming Governor Gina Raimondo announced she was reappointing O'Donnell as superintendent of the state police. So far, the only appointment she's made. This week, on the first half of Newsmakers, our guest, State Police Colonel Stephen O'Donnell. Then, 1 in 7 Rhode Island households can't afford enough food. And the number of those who rely on food pantries has nearly doubled since 2007. Sobering stats in a report released this week from the Rhode Island Community Food Bank. Our guest on the second half of Newsmakers, Rhode Island Food Bank CEO Andrew Schiff. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me, as always, on the panel, my colleague, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi. Good morning, everyone. And Colonel, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thanks for having me.
I want to congratulate you on two fronts. First, your reappointment as superintendent, and second, a recent announcement that the state police was awarded accreditation with excellence under the very high bar of the gold standard assessment by the, and this is a mouthful, Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. It's a big honor, but let's be frank, the vast majority of people watching have no idea what that is. So can you briefly explain that?
Certainly. It's a system where assessors come into our agency. We've done it for 21 years. It's the 7th time we've done it. Every 3 years they come in, they look at proofs. What a proof is a piece of paper that goes into files to make sure that the policies and procedures we have, we follow. The last two assessments, in 2009, 2011, was clear with excellence. What that means is we're 100% compliant with all the policies and procedures that CLEAR mandates, basically to be a positive and professional law enforcement organization. And then CLEAR Gold Standard would be the same thing. You're 100% compliant with all those standards, but you're 90% compliant with optional standards that you don't have to. So you're taking the extra effort to make sure you're doing the right thing. So they not only look at your standards and your paperwork, they come out with you. And 3 years ago, they actually came out with us, and they were involved in officer-involved shooting.
Out in the field, when you say
they were in the field, yeah. And they were also out with us during Hurricane Sandy, where we just couldn't physically talk to them there. They had to come with us because everything moves pretty rapidly. So,
and very few law enforcement agencies nationwide receive this gold standard assessment. Is that accurate?
That's correct. There's 5% of the 18,000 law enforcement agencies are accredited. Of that, there's 20% of that 5% get to CLEAR with excellence, and of that 20% become gold standard. So it's a very small amount of people, and we're really proud of what the men and women of the state police do on a daily basis.
Ted and I have a lot to talk to you about, and we want to start with Ferguson and protests in Providence, and an important note to our viewers. We're taping this on a Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Many of you are watching it the weekend after, so a lot can happen between now and then. But late Tuesday night, a protest over the announcement that there was no indictment in Ferguson spilled out in Providence onto Route 95, shutting the highway down for, I believe, something like 20 minutes. Troopers and police clashed with a handful of protesters, making some arrests. You're just 12 hours off of what happened last night. But do you think from a law enforcement perspective it could have been handled any differently, or are you satisfied?
I'm certainly satisfied. I think we planned. 10 days ago we had a community forum. 52 leaders from the community came out and talked to us. We talked to them. It was Providence Police and local police, so they get a better flavor for what the community thinks. We have this relationship with the community where we talk to them quite a bit. We go to forums, and there's a lot of communication back and forth. We were pretty sure that it was going to be a nonviolent protest. We knew it was going to be Central High School. So Providence Police were deployed. We had a small amount of troopers deployed really to monitor it. That's all, make sure that they're safe, and as well as everybody else on the roads was safe. It went to Providence Police. It was safe, and then somewhere in that time frame, someone decided, let's go out on the highway. They jumped the fences, and about 150 people did go out on 95, and they shut down traffic on 95 southbound.
And obviously that was not part of the plan that you talked about, the discussions with the community leaders. Obviously that did not come up.
No, absolutely not. But you also have to know, I would tell you this, the community told us, and we know this anyhow, that there'll be people placed in that crowd to agitate you. They call them agent provocateurs. They just do things to create that turmoil. The community we deal with, it was really disappointed with that. So, and that happened. So they shut the highway down. The danger with that is really common sense, that any car, truck can come and kill them. They're protesting. We have a responsibility to protect them too. So it came to a point, they told them to move. They decided they weren't going to move. A group majority decided to move. They moved slowly, which takes time. And then a group of people that didn't want to move were arrested for disorderly conduct, because they can't do that. And the luck is that we didn't have accidents that turned into a fatal accident, or accidents with injuries, or rescues that couldn't get in. We put a message out to local police and fire that they should seek alternate routes for that time being. So everything we do is a balance, Tim. I think that's what we did. Our people were told to use restraint. We understand the First Amendment. We understand the right to protest, but obviously Route 95 isn't the most appropriate place to do it.
Well, let's take a step back and look at it broadly. I mean, clearly that's an indication it's a tense time right now, and I'm wondering what your feeling is about what happened in Ferguson. It sent a ripple effect nationwide, and I think it's safe to say it enhances a distrust between some members of the minority community and police. So what's your reaction overall to what's happening right now?
Well, Ferguson it would be inappropriate for me to comment on Ferguson because it's what happened there. So I'll leave that alone. But the residual from that is the burning feeling that the community, the minority community has, and I deal with them all the time, is that they feel, right or wrong, that there's a perception that they're treated differently by law enforcement. So how do you change that perception? Is you meet and you talk and you continue. And I would tell you that the people that we deal with in the minority community, they're unbelievable. They're advocates, they stand strong. That it's also their perception. So how do you change that? We bring troopers, young police officers to forums. In fact, the Municipal Police Academy and Province Police Academy several weeks ago went to a forum with the community and let the community tell them this is how our perception is. So again, it all goes back to a balance. There is the police have to protect everybody. If it's in a community that has violence, it's bringing everybody's joint opinion together to create a better understanding. And when something happens, I think last night's actually a perfect example. We meet with them, we talk to them, and their reaction, the community leaders, was they were angry and frustrated because that's not what they want. They wanted a protest. And if I spoke to Jim Vincent this morning. The best example was
head of the NAACP.
Yes, and Jim mutual comment was, it would be nice if today we were talking to you and other people from the media about how Providence was the shining example in the country where the protests were peaceful. They were strong, measured, but it didn't turn into what it turned into. So their disappointment is also law enforcement's disappointment.
I want to turn to the topic of former House Speaker Gordon Fox, Colonel. I know there's limits to what you can say, but two of our colleagues reported this week that he's emptied 2 of his 3 campaign finance accounts, and it's now been many months since the dramatic March raids that led to his resignation. Can you say anything about the status of the investigation? I know he hasn't even been identified as a target, but will there be charges stemming from what was found in those raids?
No, understood. The only comment I would make is that I'd acquiesce to a no comment where the case is still being investigated by the FBI, State Police Attorney, and U.S. Attorney's Office, and any comment should come from that office.
One other question I'll just put to you. Brian Jones, a former Providence Journal reporter, published an op-ed after the raids suggesting that it was inappropriate for law enforcement to have the raids be so dramatic in broad daylight into the State House and everything because it led to such major political changes in the state. What do you say to those who wonder, was there a quieter way to do what happened in March?
Well, everybody has an opportunity to vent in their frustration or disagree at our tactics. Look, anybody from the small petty criminal to a major criminal, it's the same thing. So the tactics and manner in which the law enforcement goes about their business is something that we talk about. That was a mutual decision by all entities involved that's how we were going to do it. If someone doesn't like it, not much we can do about it. Look, we're following the rule of law. We have search warrants and we follow those. So if you do it the other way, you're criticized because someone's an elected official or it's a speaker that we're giving them a pass because they're in that position. So we try and look at everybody right across the board and not worry about what the residual is.
Another high-profile case, 38 Studios. It's been quite a while since we asked you about it. Last time we did, there was an active state investigation into 38 Studios. So far, radio silence. What's the update? There's
certainly an active investigation. Again, I think the disconnect with 38 Studios publicly is there's so much paperwork that goes with that. You interview one person, and that turns into another. You do a search warrant that turns into this onion that gets peeled back. So that's still an active investigation that is being investigated by the state police and the Attorney General's office.
Is it handed over to the Attorney General's office at that point? I mean, is the state police role in it at this point over?
No, there's still interview process and still paper, which leads to more paper investigations going on. So that's really true joint investigation where we have prosecutors embedded with us.
The state's facing a big deficit next year, and there was a list of departments that had overspending issues. It said that the Department of Public Safety that you run was $1.4 million over budget in the most recent fiscal year. What happened in the department that led to higher spending than expected?
Certainly a couple things. One, we removed the Fire Marshal's office from the Armory. The Fire Marshal's falls under our authority in the Department of Public Safety. The payment at the Armory, there's zero payment. We moved them because the Armory wasn't fit for them to do their job there. So we didn't project a lease. So there's a lease payment about $350,000 projected in the budget. About $1.1 million is also that was not included in the budget for raises. All state employees got 2% raises. The state police did not. Their contract is in arbitration. So the projected, if they all get 2% raises, would turn into $1.2 million. So it's a projected cost that will happen in this budget cycle. Our arbitration award, whatever they get or don't get, will be brought to fruition, I think, in January, which is this budget cycle. So that's where it's a projected shortfall that may come.
Are you concerned going forward? We are looking at a roughly $200 million deficit. We had Governor-elect Raimondo on here last week. She said it's going to be a very tough budget year. Have you been asked to look for cuts in the Department of Public Safety, and where would you look if spending has to go down?
Yes, we have, and we actually have a report that's being submitted internally on Friday. But yes, for us, we operate on a 92% fixed budget. So 8% of our budget is non-fixed costs. So for law enforcement, public safety, it's almost impossible to cut without cutting people, and that's just not appropriate. So it's very difficult for us to cut back because there's really no pork in our budget.
The state police came in and took over leadership at the Cranston Police Department, which was in turmoil. First report was issued by your organization over the high-profile ticketing scandal. That's been out, that's public, but correct me if I'm wrong, we're anticipating another overall report on the police department as a whole. When are we going to see that, and what is the state police looking at there?
Understood. The process was I assigned a captain and lieutenant to be the chief and the deputy chief of that department. They could not do an assessment because that's what they did. They were running a pretty big police department. As soon as they left, their charge was to get that assessment done. Well, I'm told it's probably a month away from a draft copy, so somewhere around the Christmas time that should be done. What that entails is from soup to nuts, from leadership from top to bottom, what transpired within that agency over the last 10 months.
And is this report going to be a public report? Are the people of Cranston going to know what the state police found?
I believe it is. I think that is a state police document. There will be things that could not be released publicly if they're related to law enforcement Bill of Rights. Otherwise, I think it's important that people do know what happened within that agency.
A lot of people at home might be thinking, wait, whoa, is this a criminal investigation? Is someone going to get charged, go to jail for something that happened at the Cranston Police Department? Is it anything like that?
No, that's a good point. We had 3 detectives assigned to Cranston for 5 months looking at allegations, and I mean allegations of criminal wrongdoing. All of them have been vetted and closed as non-criminal. But those investigations will be part of our report.
Okay.
Sort of on a lighter note, we obviously have a new governor, Gina Raimondo, and I'm curious about what November 4th is like, the election was like from the state police's perspective. You know a new governor's coming in, but you don't know who it's going to be, and as soon as that person's the governor-elect, I presume a trooper needs to be with that person. So how did you folks plan? Did you have a trooper stationed with every candidate? Did you wait somewhere and then you found out who won, and then what was their charge to do once someone was picked as the governor, in this case Gina Raimondo?
And I counted 3 troopers at the Biltmore, if I'm right. The tallest troopers clearly you have on the force, by the way.
Yeah, that wasn't me. So no, it's like everything else we plan. If it's the governor's security, or if it's a Ferguson issue. So everything we do, we plan. So obviously we knew Governor-elect Raimondo or Mayor Fung would be elected governor. So several days prior to the election, I didn't want to do it right a couple days before because the stress level. This is what you need to know is going to transpire on election night. And I need to know what you want to do after election night. So I spoke to both candidates. I told both candidates I'm going to speak to both of you. This is what we do, and this is what I need to know. So when it was projected that Governor-elect Raimondo, I picked up the phone, called her. We have a trooper on the way over to pick you up. We already briefed that she knew that trooper would bring her to the Biltmore. That is the courtesy we extend to a governor. We believe strongly in the security of the governor's office. Governor Chafee was also messaged on, obviously, because we have a detail on him. So we assigned 3 troopers to her that night for safety, and then from there, we have the responsibility from her, not just the day she's sworn in, but she's the governor-elect, and she's a galvanizing person just by being the governor, if you're the governor of the state. So we take that seriously. We put a most seasoned person on her that understands the protection detail, and that's really what we did.
How soon after that did you get the call, I assume it's a phone call, correct me if I'm wrong, that you were going to be reappointed as a superintendent, and what was that conversation like?
I really don't remember for sure specifically. I do know that the governor told me, she said, I plan on keeping you as superintendent of state police, and I'm going to announce that. So I'm not sure the date and time she did that. Obviously, I'm appreciative of that. I look forward to working with her. I have the utmost respect for her. And I talk to her transition team frequently about things for actually Ferguson. I'm briefing the governor's staff last night on Ferguson, but I'm also briefing the governor-elect staff because they both have to have some type of handle what's going on. So only when it becomes that important will I brief both of them. So I think I hopefully answer that properly.
And for the state police, are there any, when a new governor comes in, how much would you, some departments, there's big changes in policy when a different governor comes in because they want to do things differently. I assume the state police, it's mostly steady as she goes, particularly when you're keeping the same leader. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, we operate the same way for the last 90 years. Obviously, we're morphed into a different place because we're much more mature and stay with the times organization, but not much changes. I don't think a philosophy of a governor changes the mission of state police.
Our guest for the first half of Newsmakers was Rhode Island State Police Colonel Stephen O'Donnell. Colonel, thank you for joining us on the program.
You're welcome.
And when we come back, the CEO of the Rhode Island Community Food Bank, Andrew Schiff. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. To my right, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi, and our guest for the first half is the CEO of the Rhode Island Community Food Bank, Andrew Schiff. Andrew, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
You put out a report this week, and you found the rate of food insecurity in the state is 14.4%. What does food insecurity mean, and do you have any idea how we compare nationally?
Sure. So we're right at the national average. Food insecurity is a measure of the USDA, and start with what food security is. They define food security as a household being able to afford adequate food for a healthy, active lifestyle. Food insecurity is when you can't afford adequate food, and so you're skipping meals, you're cutting the size of meals. Some families go without food because they can't afford it. And that is the definition of food insecurity. It's actually based on a survey that the USDA does each year, and that's where we get the 1 in 7 number.
33,000 people, per your report, were served by a food bank in 2007. 2014, that number is 63,000 per year. Look, the economy's recovering, right, nationwide. So I realize a 7-year comparison is bad, but what about a year-to-year? Is there any improvement, any signs of hope in this area?
Yeah, we've seen things improve slightly. Last year we were as high at some points as 68,000 people each month, so we've seen that at least it's stabilized a bit, and we're happy to see that happen. But if you go back to pre-recession levels, we were serving, as you said, 33,000 people a month. We thought that was too many. Now 63,000
So
people a month.
what do you make of it?
You know, even though the Rhode Island economy is recovering from the recession, there are people who are left behind. Families that can't afford basic needs. And those are the people who are turning to us for food assistance.
The biggest government program that deals with food insecurity is obviously food stamps, now the SNAP program. And I want to show a chart we ran recently on WPRI.com. You can see it there. There was a huge jump in the number of Rhode Islanders using food stamps from around 70,000 before the recession, almost 180,000 here today, nearly 17% of the state's population. And obviously, if you look at that chart there, you see that it's leveled off, but doesn't appear to be really falling particularly fast. Does that fit with what you're seeing? It sounds like it does that as well, that there's, we're not having more people be added to the rolls, but not that much decrease in need?
Well, yes, so there are a couple things about that. One is that there are people being added because there are always people coming off. So as one family, somebody gets a job, but things are getting better for a particular family, and the unemployment rate is coming down. Some folks are finding work, things are getting better for them. they come off the program, but the unfortunate thing is so many new folks are coming on. And why is that? I think one of the main reasons is that folks who have been unemployed for longer than 6 months lost their unemployment benefits, and that was last January. And for them, things are really tough.
And nearly 17%, as I said, of the state's population on food stamps. You know, anytime we publish a story like that, we hear from folks who say, look, that's far too many people. This is supposed to be like an emergency program. Are they, are they refusing to get a job? Are those people all actually people who need assistance? I mean, do you think there's an overuse of food stamps at all? Or do you think that represents the real need of how many people are in that kind of situation?
I think it reflects the real need because the program goes through a lot to make sure that people are income eligible. And as the program, expands, will also contract when the economy improves and people are getting back to work. The thing that I should say is also that a lot of the people receiving food stamps are working, but they're at such low-wage jobs that they still qualify for the program.
Now, undoubtedly you want to see more people qualify for the program. Congress is going through a changeover. The Senate is now in Republican hands. Both sides of the chamber are in Republican hands. Do you think that affects your ability to make that happen? I notice, and I ask because I notice on your homepage, you say, here's how you get in touch with Senator Reid, here's how you get in touch with Senator Whitehouse, but they're entering the minority party now. Yes,
I think that the concern that we have is not around eligibility. I think there is pretty much support across the board in Congress that SNAP is the first defense against hunger. You want to make sure that people are able to access that program, and it's an entitlement program. What we're saying is that SNAP benefits are too modest, and that a family that qualifies should be able to use those benefits to afford food throughout the month, and they can't. That's often when they're turning to us at a food pantry because they run out of their SNAP benefits. So we want to see the benefit increased to reflect the real cost of food.
Historically, one of the ways food banks get the food you get is excess supply from supermarkets. I know as a business reporter, supply chain management keeps improving, which means less excess food, which of course is good for them as businesses, but not necessarily good for you. Is that trend having a real impact at the food bank? Are you seeing that?
We're seeing that trend not only at the food bank, but across the country. Supermarkets, food manufacturers are much better at inventory control. They have less surplus food to give away. They're still generous. They want to help us when they can, but they just don't have the volume of excess food that they used to.
How has the food that people get from pantries changed over the years? I think a lot of people think about canned goods because they keep. Is there a new philosophy? Is it changed? Are you getting fresher foods?
Yes, we are. So out of the 10 million pounds of food that we distribute each year, 2 million pounds is fresh produce now. And we have 169 member agencies across the state. We've worked with all of our member agencies to make sure that they have the capacity to be able to store and quickly distribute that fresh produce.
Is that because there is more turnover? I mean, we look at the numbers, there are more people going to a food pantry than there were 7 years ago, almost double. And is that one of the effects? That's because there's more turnover, you can have more produce in a pantry?
That's a good point. I think it's also this trend. There's less food being donated from supermarkets, so we've looked to other sources. And one of the sources that's come forward for us are growers. And so we're able to bring in that food, but it takes a whole new level of efficiency in our distribution system to be able to handle fresh food versus canned food.
Last time you were on the program, you told us that Rhode Island state government contributes less money toward its food bank system in the state than neighboring Massachusetts and Connecticut, I believe. I presume that's still the case. Are you still trying to change that? Do you hear any people on the State House saying maybe we should up how much we give to the food banks, or is it mostly in tough times fall on deaf ears?
I think that folks at the State House are very sympathetic to what we do and supportive of what we do. Honestly, I think that most folks don't realize that the food bank's grant was cut in half at the same time that we've seen the need for food assistance almost double in the state. And it's my job to try to get that message across, to let people know how dire the need is, and we really need more state support.
All right, so how do people help if they're watching this show right now? We have about a minute left.
So one thing is, if you're not familiar with the food bank, we have a great thing. We have an open house on Saturday, December 13th. Come on down to the food bank, see what we do, help us volunteer that day, that's one thing. We need donations. It's easy, rifoodbank.org to donate. And we need advocacy. We need voices. We need folks talking to their state senators, state representatives, and letting them know that the work of the food bank is important, not just for the whole state, but in their own districts. Everybody knows a local food pantry. Everybody knows a local soup kitchen. They're getting their food from the food bank.
And if someone needs help?
They should call 211. It's the easiest way. We have a really good system in the state for getting people connected with help.
And we'll put on our website, on the Newsmakers website, a link to the Rhode Island Community Food Bank so you can find out more information there and donate directly if you'd like to. Andrew Schiff, CEO of the Rhode Island Community Food Bank, thank you very much for joining us on the program. If you missed any of it, it's online, WPRI.com. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers with U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse.